which is, he was a young man.
How old was he? Do you remember?
In his 20s, I think. So, yeah, it was just, to me, it was unbelievable that we could do anything like that.
Well, that's all my questions that I have, but we kind of went off topic, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's good. It's interesting to know more stuff about, like, the local instead of, like, how the whole America.
Yeah, because, like I said, I, for one, I don't know about other people, but if you were a working mother, your life was coming home and taking care of your children and grocery shopping and taking care of bills. And
Did you have a stressful life? Like, what do you think it was more stressful to be a man or a woman?
in our business, I would say it was equal, because I worked right out there sometimes like a man. And, you know, I worked all winter in the potato house and worked the harvester. I've even rode the planter and, you know, things like that.
But then you'd have to come home and cook and clean and take care of the
Have
kids.
complete responsibility of all of that, and your grandfather didn't. He had a lot more playtime than I did. I didn't have playtime.
And you still think it was equal stress? Because, wow.
Well, I guess the more we talk about it, I'm going to have to say no.
Oh, that's
I
what I was thinking.
More stress on the women. In my case, it was, I think. Because, you know.
Because after a long, hard day at work, you'd have to go deal with the little punks that run
That's
around and cook and clean while Grampy was out
Bowling
bowling.
having
Bowling?
fun.
Is that what he did for fun?
Yes.
Was that a big thing back in the 60s?
Yes.
Very big?
He belonged to 2 bowling teams. And he was on the fire department.
Was there a women's bowling team?
There was, but
Were you interested in bowling?
I would have been if I'd had a babysitter, or the men just didn't do the things that they do now. They didn't stay home at night so that the woman could go somewhere. If you were going to go somewhere, you had to figure it out.
Right. So, is that what else they did for fun? Like, what else would you do for fun around here other than bowling and go to dances and go snowmobiling?
Of course, hunting and fishing for the men, and some of the women, if they were so minded. I can't think of anything else that we...
So basically, your everyday life consisted of taking care of family.
Mine did.
Right. So you didn't have enough, like, as much time to go do all
No.
that stuff.
No.
Were you happy about that, or disappointed?
Resented it sometimes.
Regretted it? Do you wish, like, you did things differently?
I don't know what I could have done differently. You know,
Have,
looking
like, less
back.
kids, maybe?
Pardon?
Have less kids, maybe?
No, I only had 3, so that wasn't...
Was that a lot back then? Because I know that's a lot now.
No, it wasn't. That was average. Yeah. And some families had more, you know. But now people really start and think about, am I going to be able to bring this kid up? Am I going
Right.
to
Because the economy's so bad now.
Yeah, and you're expecting your kids to go to college.
Right.
And back then, it was just kind of, you know...
Was there as much planning, like, for your kid? Like,
no, I think you
less
waited
worry?
to find out whether they really wanted to go or not. And then you did the best you could to get them to college. But a lot of kids didn't. Like I said, they knew the mill was here.
Right.
And they made a decent wage. They made a living working in the mill.
it wasn't like now where you get like $7.50 an hour and have to work your butt off to make like what you need to live every week.
Now you couldn't live on a minimum wage. When I worked on the farm, I didn't get paid.
You didn't get paid?
No, I did not get paid. That is one thing that I have think of the word I want to say.
Well, if you got paid, wouldn't it be basically taking the money out of the company and putting it in your pocket?
Yeah, but it would make you feel better if you had control of money.
So like even just the not the tiniest, but even like just minimum wage, would you have been more happy?
Yes.
Because do you think like Grampy would have let that happen? Maybe like did he get paid? Did he pay himself?
The men were allowed, well, Grampy would, my husband, Terry, was paid a wage, and that's what we lived on. And some extras, like a vehicle, came out of the business. But his wage is what fed us and clothed us, and, you know.
And it wasn't hard to do any of that? It was relatively easy to...
You mean to use that money to do those things?
Like what I'm saying, like did you have any extra to do what you wanted with?
No, not really. We lived differently because of the farm. If there was something, like if...
Basically, the farm, like... Oh, what do I want to say? Like, set you. Like, basically, so you wouldn't need all the extras. Other than food and clothing, you had a car, you had work.
That's the toys came out of the farm. If you had a good year, somebody might have a new boat or a new snowmobile. If you had a bad year, you just didn't buy things.
Right.
But you still,
He
met his wage to feed us, and you never felt like you didn't have money enough to pay your bills and buy your food and all of that stuff. The farm always did that.
So, is that another reason why you would like to live back like it was in the 60s?
No, I don't
or
want
the 80s?
The 80s I would go back to, because at that time we were able to decide if, like, we could have a new snow sled. The business was doing well. Everybody could have a new vehicle, or you might...
But they didn't get anything, like everything new every year, right?
No. It all depended on what was going on the farm.
So, if you had like a new snowmobile, like if you bought everything new one year, or the next year you bought everything new, what would you do with the money that you had if everything was basically new and there was nothing better? What would you do with it?
Buy a piece of equipment.
Even,
in fact,
even if you have the newest and best and latest and the greatest?
Yeah, because if you did not buy something, if you made a good profit, the government would eat you alive.
Yeah, so basically you wanted to spend the money
you had
so
to,
you wouldn't get
in
taxed?
the business you had to, not personally. But in the business you had to, maybe buy a new farm truck or a new tractor or something like that. If you just got sheer profit and didn't spending on anything, the government would eat you alive. It would put you in such a high bracket.
Why would they eat you alive?
Well, you're taxed on brackets. So if you got into a high bracket, they're going to tax you. And so...
So you wanted to stay in the middle bracket?
Yes. And you want to spend some of that profit on a new piece of equipment that will, that you can use in your business. And then when you've got a lean year and you can't buy anything, you've got decent equipment to work with.
Did you ever feel like you were expanding too much?
No. In fact, we stopped farming because you had to be so big, and we couldn't do that. We had no means of any more land or anything like that.
There was no more land?
No.
So with all that extra money that you were making, you couldn't go out and buy land? Was it
There was none available.
Just, were there so much farmland out here?
Yeah, it all belonged to somebody else. I mean, we owned our acreage. The Veazys owned theirs, the Foglers owned theirs, the Dormans owned theirs, and there was no way of expanding. And by the time your father and Steve, and there was still Grampy and Graham, and there was Dad and I, there was, too many families for a
One
small
company.
farm.
Did you hire anybody else?
Oh, sure.
So why wouldn't you just, fire them and just make it like an
Because the
extreme?
family couldn't do it themselves. There wasn't enough of us to do everything.
So why didn't you, downsize the extra workers that you hired?
Well, because you have to have X amount of people. Were you ever in the potato house when we were shipping potatoes? You was pretty little.
As I was young, I only remember seeing Dad every morning, going to the potato house every morning before I went to school.
Yeah.
That's all I
Well,
really
we had
remember.
to have X amount of people to work on those potatoes, to bag them and the whole 9 yards. You had to have X amount of workers. So it just,
It was a good time to get out of it.
yes, an excellent time to get out of it. And Grampy Rowland never knew that we shut the farm down.
What do you mean?
He died.
Oh.
And the summer that we stopped farming, I think we were raising grains at that time. We weren't raising potatoes, but he never knew that we went out of business and auctioned off all of the machinery and all of that stuff.
What'd you do with all that money?
We
Saved
were
it?
in debt.
You were in debt?
Every year you would have to borrow money to plant your crop, and then when you sold your crop, you paid back the money that you had borrowed.
I thought you
To
said you were
operate.
making it good, though.
Well, it was a vicious cycle. That's the way everybody operated. I can't explain it to you, but it takes money to put a crop into the ground. So if your profit didn't allow you to, you didn't have enough money left to put another crop in after you had bought some piece of equipment and that type of thing, you would borrow money. Everybody did. That's the way you farmed. You borrowed money to put your crop in, and then, to pay your workers and all of that. And as you sold your potatoes, you paid back that borrowed money. Well, we had, if you didn't plant a crop, that money that we had borrowed still had to be paid back. And we auctioned off all of the machinery and stuff like that. And, of course, that's sheer profit, and so you got to pay the tax to the government.
Did you have any money extra?
No, we were still in debt a small amount. And so by selling the potato house, we have paid off that debt. So that's the way business is run. And because we are fortunate enough to rent all of our tillable land to the Cranes, we are able to not have to sell any of our land. And it could be sold in a heartbeat to any of the farmers around here. But we hopefully will never have to, as long as they rent it. That rent
Basically
pays
pays
the
itself.
taxes. And with a small amount left over. So that's how we survive now.
So you make money, too?
You make a small amount. There's a small amount left over, and that is for Dad and I, for Grampy and I,
Right.
to living on Social Security. Just you can't do it. Not and maintain a home and all of that stuff. We have to buy our vehicles now. The farm don't.
Right.
That's why we have second-hand ones instead of new ones.
Well, Grampy still seems to get a new one every year or something. Every 2
No,
years.
they're not new.
Well,
they're new to him.
That's what I meant.
But it's an entirely different lifestyle than it was when we were on the farm.